Ethan, aged 24, comes back home and finds his best friend trying to rape his girlfriend Angela, aged 21. Out of anger, he picks up a solid wood and hits it on the back head of his best friend. He falls and never wakes up. He immediately alerts the police on the situation and is taken to prison. The court decides he was going to spend 20 years in prison. Before leaving the courtroom, he says to his girlfriend Angela, "Promise me you're going to wait for me." Angela, in tears, replies, "Yes, sweetie, I will wait for you." As time passed, Angela refuses to marry any man that came her way, saying she is waiting for her husband to get out of prison. She spent most of her time at her work and chilled very less often with her friends. On her 25th birthday, she decides to throw a little party at a small restaurant in her area with just few friends. While in the restaurant, a young and charming young man is attracted to her and walks up to her to ask for her number, but she turned him down completely. But one of her friends forcefully gave him her number based on how good-looking he was. The young man tries to call her many times, but she doesn't pick up. Her friends try to convince her to give him a shot. Then she meets up with the man in a fancy restaurant. He happened to be the CEO of an oil company he inherited from his father and was the only child. After 6 months of dating, the man proposes to her and she agrees to marry him. He fixed the date of their wedding. But on a second thought, she tells her mom and friends she didn't want to push through with the wedding after remembering the promise she made to her boyfriend who is in prison, but her friends won't allow her to do it and advised she push through with the wedding. Just a year after their wedding, she stumbles upon Ethan in a grocery shop. She was shocked to see him and asked, "When did you get out of prison?" Ethan replies, "I have been out for 5 months now based on a government decree that said there should be a release of prisoners who already spent up to 5 years and above in prison and was one of the lucky ones." "So how are you?" He said, "I tried reaching out to you but to no avail. I had lost all contacts and you stopped visiting me in prison." She said it was a long story. He then takes her number and wanted her to meet him in his apartment the next day. When she arrives in his apartment, he notices the ring in her hand. He immediately asked, "Are you married now?" Angela says yes. He sobs, saying, "You promised to wait." Angela begins to apologize to him. Ethan tells her he wants her back, but she tells him it's too late. She's already married and has to move on, and promised to help him out to start his life by giving him some money, but Ethan refused. The two begin to see each other again until Angela becomes pregnant for Ethan. She meets up with her best friend and she tells her she was pregnant but for Ethan and not her husband. Her friend advises her not to tell Ethan about the pregnancy being his but for her husband. Angela doesn't keep to her friend's advice and tells Ethan the pregnancy is his. Ethan was so happy he was going to become a father. She also tells her husband they were expecting a baby, not telling him that it wasn't his, and he was so overjoyed. Her husband could only love her the more and did everything to make her happy. After 9 months, she gives birth to a set of twin boys. When the boys were 6 years old, Ethan could no longer help it watching his children from a distance in another man's house and tells her to divorce her husband for him. She refuses. It gets to the point where he begins to sneak into her husband's house when he's not around. He said he will not stop until she agrees to his decision to divorce her husband, pointing out that she has nothing to lose. After all, her husband is very wealthy and that after the divorce she would inherit most of her husband's properties. Meanwhile, her husband begins to be suspicious of her attitude, especially towards her phone, and also because she begins to refuse to sleep with him. He sets up hidden security cameras in the house without her knowledge. It is then that he discovers the in and out movements of Ethan inside his house and sleeping with his wife, and the phone calls revealing the children were not his. He keeps quiet as if he knew nothing and takes the children on a secret DNA test, and it revealed his findings were true. So the children weren't his. He goes further to do a fertility test on himself to find out if he could have children, and the results showed that he couldn't, since he had spent over a year with his wife and couldn't get her pregnant. The man in rage drives home in anger. When he arrives home, he asked his wife if she was hiding anything from him, but she said no. Her husband gives her 7 days to tell him the truth. On day 7, he asked her one more time if she had anything to hide. She replies no. Then he throws the DNA test on her and shows her all the camera footage on TV. She begins to whip, asking for her husband to forgive her. He drove her out of his house, including the children. A month later, she hears news of her husband committing suicide and willing all of his properties to charity.